Okay, so it looks like we're recording now. I taught this whole lesson with the microphone off, so I'm going to try and do it again a little more concisely. In the plan today, you have a document attached, and it's got a bunch of quotes from the beginning of Act 5 from Lady Macbeth, and they recall earlier quotes that Lady Macbeth spoke in the play. And I want to return to this because Lady Macbeth is an important character, and this question of traditional gender roles and what exactly the play is saying about breaking gender roles, or where is maybe the right and proper sphere for a woman in Shakespeare's mind, is one that I think is worth thinking about, because Lady Macbeth starts out as such a strong character, the planner of Duncan's murder, whose husband she thinks is, quote, too full of the milk of human kindness and incapable of carrying all this out. So you could argue that Lady Macbeth sets everything in motion, and yet by the beginning of Act 5, she's kind of gone crazy, is not conscious anymore, and ultimately commits suicide off stage. She doesn't even get the glory and honor of an on-stage death. So she's really quite reduced in stature by the end of the play. And I think examining some of these quotes can help us understand something about her character transformation. So I also want to talk about how you can get a document into Notability and annotate it, because that's something we're going to be doing as we write the final essay on Macbeth. So this is just good practice. Now, maybe you know another way that you can draw on a document that's easier than the way I'm going to show you. This is the only way I know, so it's the only way I can show you. If you open up the document rather on Google Classroom, it probably has like a box in the top right corner. You won't see these three dots that I have until you click on that box. Once you are at a place where you can see the three dots, you want to click on those, and in the drop-down menu, you're going to see Share and Export. So click on that. You want to send a copy of the document as a PDF, and then it's going to prepare the PDF, la, la, la. These are all your apps here that you can choose from, but it's not appearing in my most recent one, so click on the three dots for more, and in that drop-down list, you'll see Notability. So I want to create a new note. That's fine, title, and I'm going to import it. One file sent to Notability. Good, done. So I get out of here, I go to Notability. If I look at all notes, there it is, Lady Macbeth Now and Then. So now I click on it, and on the top here you have all these different choices. I'm going to choose the pencil. And what I can do with the pencil is draw. So if I look at the directions, to draw a line to connect the quote on the left to their counterpart on the right side. In her sleep, she's recalling lines from earlier. See if you can match them. Let's look at the directions though for what comes after this, because that'll help you to think about these quotes as you're matching them. Once you've matched all of the 8 quotes with their counterparts, pick one pair that you feel revealed the most change in Lady Macbeth's attitude or demeanor, or where the language has changed in an important way. So they're not exact quotes. It's not like she's merely repeating word for word or verbatim what she said earlier. There's some small differences that I think have significance. So in a response, you're going to discuss your choice and what you think it reveals about her character. Consider why it might be significant to note that she isn't conscious when saying the Act 5 lines, and it is right before her suicide. Finally, consider Lady Macbeth's story arc from her initial, quote, unsexing in order to direct her husband to murder, through her gradual marginalization or being pushed off to the sides as Macbeth became the planner, to her final unceremonious exit by suicide, which happens off stage at the very beginning of Act 5, and well before the major battle between Macbeth and Macduff. So you might also remember the fate of her character foil, Lady Macduff, who's the traditional woman in the play, and what sort of becomes her, as opposed to Lady Macbeth, who kind of takes on the male role through her unsexing. And think about all that in determining what is the play saying as a whole on the issue of traditional gender roles and the question of female independence. So I want to show you, just draw on here. So if I start with this quote, to bed, there's knocking at the gate. That's the Act 5 quote, and I want to find the original in the earlier, so I'm just going to scan through here, and there it is in the middle. I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. So to bed, there's knocking at the gate. I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. So those two quotes, those are the matched pair. There is differences in the language that I think are worth thinking about. And so if we do a little annotation, that will help prepare the response. In the original, she says, I hear a knocking at the south entry. This is a very specific place in her home. It's a real place. Now, this is right after they murdered Duncan. I think Macduff is finally arriving, and the porter is going to let him in. But they have to go hide in their bedroom so that they're not associated with the murder they just committed. So she says, I hear knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. Chamber is bedroom. So again, a specific place, and the we here is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So a very particular portion of their home where they hear an actual literal knocking, and as a consequence, they decide to go to their bedroom to hide. Well, in the Act 5, it's a little less particular and specific. Instead of there's a knocking at the south entry, instead of I hear a knocking at the south entry, there's a knocking at the gate. This is more vague. By gate, what are we talking about? It makes me think of the gates of hell. Whoops, sorry. The gates, like there's a knocking at the gates of hell, or maybe it's the gate, St. Peter's gate. St. Peter in the Christian mythology is sort of the guardian of the gates to heaven. So this gate could be a gate to heaven or hell. Maybe it's important that it's vague, because where would Lady Macbeth go? So there's a knocking at the gate. Could be the gate of heaven to hell. To bed, also less specific. It's not Lady Macbeth and Macbeth to their bedroom. It's to bed. Bed can be maybe associated, if we consider that this is in the context of her last thoughts before her suicide. Bed here could be like the grave, which is where you, whoops, sorry, that keeps taking me out. The place of eternal sleep. So bed might be a euphemism for the grave. So whereas earlier she was engaged in covering up a murder and planning to take over a throne, here it's more of an acknowledgement that maybe her story's run its course, her life has run its course. There's a knocking at the gate. It seems to suggest something is beckoning her to death. To bed. So it's quite a changed circumstance here. No longer is she the woman who's very much involved in events of life and power and kingship and so on. She's being called to the hereafter. She feels she hears death calling, perhaps, the knocking at the gate of heaven or hell. So that would be something I would write about in my response after making the connection. What does that language suggest? That, well, over the course of the play, her initial enthusiasm for the affairs of men, power, kingship, has ultimately driven her mad, in which she's to a point where she's racked with guilt and finally suicidal. And the only calling after she's committed all these misdeeds that she's heeding is a calling to the grave. So it seems to be a pretty dire warning against a woman stepping out of, or at least stepping too far out of her traditional role. That's a conclusion I think I could draw from that. That might be a fair conclusion. Okay, so the last thing is you're going to write all that response in a separate document attached to Google Classroom, but when you want to submit the drawing where you've connected the quotes, you need to get this out of Notability. So on the top left here, this little box with the arrow, if you click on that, you can export it to Google Drive. It's going to tell you what folder it goes into. So right now it's going into the folder Macbeth JC DHS. So if I send it to Google Drive, that when I go to submit it on Classroom, I'll know that it's in the folder Macbeth JC DHS. If I open up Classroom now, obviously I can't submit it. I don't have the assignment link like you have, but you know how you have the option to attach a document. You're going to scroll through your documents from Google Drive and attach the one that you've exported from Notability. Okay, good luck.